Many years ago, a friend shared an experience that she had had. She told me one day that when she was swimming in a lake somewhere, she leaned back into the water. Looking up at the blue, blue sky, she had this deep sense that there would be peace over the entire planet when the exact molecules of water that were touching her in that moment came back together again as water in some distant future. She was overjoyed to experience this knowing. She told me that she relaxed deeper and deeper into that moment, knowing that the water held her and that one day there would be lasting peace. For a brief moment, she let go of her fears of destruction, climate change, and war. She surrendered for the moment, held by the water. Sometime later, I visited Walden Pond, the same Walden Pond that Henry David Thoreau built his cabin near. The type of place where you might think that a spiritual awakening might happen. While a friend took a swim across the lake and back, I tried to experience the peace and trust that my other friend had shared with me. I did not expect to have one of those peak spiritual moments like she had, but I hoped to feel an inner sense of peace, a sense of surrender, and a feeling of deep trust. I lay back into the water and immediately thought about sinking. What if I was the one person who could not float? I jumped out of the water. I tried again. This time, I worried about the fish. What if the fish bite me? I leapt up again, and I tried again. Oh my goodness, the snapping turtles. The snapping turtles are going to get me this time. And I tried, and I tried, and I tried again and again. I was afraid when my ears went under the water when I could no longer hear. I was afraid that I would drift into those shadowy, murky waters where there would be dragons. I worried that I would float out into the waters so deep that I would forget how to swim and become stranded. Eventually, I was able to relax just enough to notice that the sky was blue. I noticed that though I could not hear, everything seemed to be okay. I noticed that the water was, in fact, holding me, and I did not appear to be drowning. I noticed that I could actually breathe while floating. After a couple of uneasy breaths, I gave up, surrendering to my fear, and climbed out onto the shore. Surrendering and letting go has never been something that I have done very well. I have a deep desire to control all aspects of my life. I want to know what I am doing, when I am doing it, and why I'm doing it. I want everything to have a purpose, and I want to have already figured it all out. I want to be fully prepared. I want things to happen the way that I want them to happen. I want to be in control. I want to make the decisions. I want the outcomes to be what I planned for. I desire this control so much that in recent weeks I have considered adding a note to the top of each of my worship scripts. A note that simply reads, "Contingency plans, question mark." I very much would like each worship service to turn out the way that I had envisioned. I do not want to go with the flow. My interest in adding a memo about contingency plans is me trying to gain control over something that cannot be controlled. The worship service is a container for something uncontrollable to happen. The worship leaders do not dictate what happens in the sanctuary. It is you, the gathered community, and spirit, God, mystery, or just simple coincidence that makes the worship service into what it is. We who are up here create and hold the container, and then we get out of the way to let the magic happen. My desire for control is a learned method for getting through life. Both of my parents used types of control to cope with their lives. Controlling their environments helped them manage their fears. For example, my father maintained control by recording a particular news report on PBS every week. These were categorized by date and topic and tracked in a notebook filled with graph paper. And my mother had a place for every single thing in our house. It was very important to maintain this order. Growing up, I learned that an ordered life was a safe life. This grasping, clinging, and controlling is not unique to me or my family. This is something that human beings have been wrestling with, possibly since we crawled out of our watery home onto the shore. Unitarian Universalist minister Daniel Cantor writes, "We are terrible at surrender. We, you and me, like control, feeling like we have power over people and the events in our lives. It's the Unitarian Universalists who like to apply reason to all things. It's a world of people who, like us, want everything clearly defined and logical. We know that we are terrible at giving up control because many of the world's religions and other traditions teach surrender as a way to live our lives more fully. Islam invites people to surrender to Allah. It teaches that offering one's whole life to God is the first step in religious practice. Evangelical Christians sometimes speak of surrendering their own self-will and submitting instead to the will of God or Christ. Buddhism teaches that life is filled with what is called dukkha, which loosely translates to the grasping of what we want and the pushing away of what we don't want. The solution to dukkha is to develop a sense of equanimity and letting go of both the grasping and the repelling. And the 12-step programs speak of surrendering one addiction to the healing embrace of a power greater than our own behavioral habits. During my years as a hairstylist in New York City, I practiced surrender every day. Each appointment was 1 hour long. In that 1 hour, I consulted with my client, figured out what haircut would work best for them, and then I got to work, creating a piece of art on their head. At the end of the hour, whether or not I felt that the haircut was perfect enough and ready to go, I had to say goodbye to my client and goodbye to my piece of art. The challenge here was that hair grows and people are impulsive. 6 or so weeks later, my client would return, and each and every time their hair would have grown and my creation would be destroyed. Some of my clients, one in particular, would take a pair of scissors to her hair and chop off offending chunks and curls. Again, my work was destroyed. Over the 5 years of up to 8 haircuts per day, I learned to let go of my need to control my clients' hair. There was just no way to control other people's hair. I learned that my creations were not destroyed, and I learned that my creations were never mine to begin with. I learned to let go, to surrender, to peel my grasping fingers off of their heads. I am grateful for those years of practice. Without those years of practice, I would have put the words contingency plans across the top of every worship service. In his essay, Living Beyond Control, Stephen Cope writes about his approach to life. He writes, "I've learned to trust what I call the Braille method of living, relinquishing grand plans and schemes in favor of an intuitive approach, feeling my way from tree to tree, relinquishing my attempts to control the world, and learning, instead, to trust a discerning surrender." Cope continues, my best friend Adam puts this so well. When confronted with a conundrum, he says, well, let life do it. He writes, finally, I'm learning to live inside the view that everything really already is okay. I may not understand it, but I know that it is so. I do not have to be the doer. Living as not the doer is a surprising way to live. I never know what's going to happen. I am no longer in control, in the illusion of the control. And he concludes with a little addition from me. The great irony is that the less I do, the more gets done. The less I try to be somebody, the more somebody appears moment by moment. Classes get taught, articles get written, worship services get created, sermons get birthed, hair gets cut, dinners with friends get organized. Who's doing it all? I don't know. Not me. I love this idea of the Braille method of living, the relinquishing of grand plans and schemes in favor of an intuitive approach, feeling our way from tree to tree, getting out of our own way so that the magic can happen, creating a container and a willingness to welcome what will come. We do not know what it will be. We cannot force the outcome that we think that we want. We can only create the space for whatever it is and then welcome what will be. When I think back to that time when I tried to float on Walden Pond, I see that I was not willing to surrender my control. I was afraid, full of fear. Though I focused my fears on the snapping turtles and the imagined dragons in the murky waters, I was actually afraid of what resides deep within me, in my heart. Had I let go in the moment, I might have felt that enlivening connection to the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. I might have felt peace, that deep, quiet connection that runs through all of life, all of creation. But I was afraid that I would not feel that connection. In that moment when I asked, what if I am the one person who cannot float? I was really asking, what if I am the one person who cannot feel that connection to life? And that is one of the most frightening questions to face in our lifetimes. So I ask you, what imagined dragons or snapping turtles get in the way of you leaning back into the waters of life? What holds you from letting go, from surrendering? What will it take for you to peel your grasping fingers off of your need for some kind of control? How will you trust?